This episode is brought to you by my friend Rebecca Walzer, a financial expert who can help you protect your wealth. Book your free call with her team by going to friendofdinesh.com. That's friendofdinesh.com. Coming up, I want to look back at the Governor Whitmer kidnapping plot. Interesting report that gives us an idea of the human side of all that, which is what the latest jury seems to have missed. I'll examine New York Times columnist Charles Blow's new concept of not white privilege, but light privilege. I'll tell you what that means. Larry Elder joins me. We're going to talk about how the GOP can put forward an agenda to appeal to blacks, and particularly black males. And I'll consider what happens when Muslim parents mobilize against the leftist agenda for public schools. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Show.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Podcast.
I don't know if you're familiar with the controversy in Los Angeles where several members of the city council, and in fact a labor union leader, they were talking on a series of calls. I guess they were Zoom calls or some sort of conference calls. And there were all kinds of racial epithets used, racial epithets against blacks. In one case, a reference to Jews. And they were talking about a state assembly member named Richard Katz, talking about how the Jews have made a deal with South Los Angeles. At one point, the council president, Nuri Martinez, who is obviously Hispanic, she's now resigned, but she referred to a colleague's, who is black, his son, as she compared him to a monkey. And then talking about another guy, she goes, F that guy, he's with the blacks. Now, all of this erupted several days ago, and I was kind of watching it with interest to see what kind of sense people would try to make of it. Well, here's Charles Blow, the African-American columnist for the New York Times, a revealing racist rant in LA. Now, here's Charles Blow's take on this episode, and he goes into it in some detail. He says that this is what he calls not white supremacy, but light supremacy, L-I-T-E. And his point is that you have lighter-skinned people who are not white, in this case, obviously Hispanic, but he goes, they are kind of borrowing the racism of the whites and allying with white supremacy against their darker skinned black colleagues. So according to Charles Blow, he's like, at one time in the civil rights movement, we had kind of hoped that there would be an alliance of all the minorities to overthrow white supremacy. He goes, it's not really working out that way. And what this latest episode shows is that the people in the middle, let's call them the coffee colored people or the brown people, really he's referring to people like Debbie and me. He goes, these are the people who are going to join the white supremacists, and look over here, look at this episode. Now, I think that what is funny about all this is that this is a complete misreading of what is going on in this episode itself. So let's look a little more clearly and a little more honestly at what is actually happening. There is a struggle for power when groups identify ethnically, and to some degree that is unavoidable. I mean, we want to get rid of race as a factor in decision making, but you can't get rid of ethnicity. You can't prevent, for example, Indian Americans in kind of coalescing together, lending money to one another. Jews, of course, have been tribal for thousands of years. Most people have a tribal element to them. And I think what's going on here is that you have a jostling for power that is going on in Los Angeles between different ethnic groups. And the jostling now is not occurring with the whites so much as it is between the blacks and the Hispanics. Now, let's notice that blacks have disproportionately high levels of political power in Los Angeles compared to Hispanics. Los Angeles is almost one half Latino. So you'd be like, well, you'd probably expect roughly one half of Latinos, not necessarily to be university professors or to be in any particular profession, but to be represented in politics. politics, because after all, democratic politics is supposed to roughly reflect people as they are in a given community. But it turns out that the Hispanics in Los Angeles are, as the left now says, underrepresented. And so what are they doing? They're pushing to get more political power. And so they are now in ethnic rivalry with the blacks. It's not that the Hispanics are like, we are half white and so we are joining white supremacy. No, it's more like, and at one point, here's Charles Blow, he goes, the problem with this kind of, as he calls it, light supremacy is, he goes, it's based on the idea that political power is a zero-sum game. Well, here's my point. It is. Political power is a zero-sum game, because if one group gets more, it means the other group gets less. And this is true, by the way, of other areas as well. University admissions is a zero-sum game. Why? Because the number of seats, for example, at Yale Law School or at University of Michigan freshman class is limited. If it was an unlimited number of seats, they could always say, well, let's take more, and it's not going to affect any other group. But if you get more blacks and or Hispanics at Yale, that means less whites and less Asian Americans. That's an algebraic necessity. You cannot raise the level of underrepresented groups without lowering the level of the overrepresented groups. And so here what's going on is, it seems to me that this kind of ethnic hostility isn't so much racism in the classic sense. I mean, I think it's very revealing that Charles Blow in this article never defines racism. He never says what racism is. Racism is a belief in the biological superiority of one group over another. Now, where in this exchange, acrimonious though it is, insulting though it is, people are calling each other's names, but where is racism? Where is it that Nuri Martinez, who's supposedly the worst offender, where does she say or even imply that Hispanics are biologically superior to blacks? She never does that. She basically doesn't like blacks. And what happens is, by the way, the feeling is often reciprocal. Ethnic groups jostling for power often develop a certain kind of animus or hostility to one another. So that, I think, is a more accurate reading of what's going on than Charles Blow's bloviations. If I were to quiz you about George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, how many questions would you get right? If you were only listening to the mainstream media, you would most likely fail. The media lied to you about George Floyd and ignored the fact that the Black Lives Matter organization used his name to raise $90 million. Now, if you ever wondered where the money went, well, we finally have some answers. And now Candace Owens' documentary, The Greatest Lie Ever Sold, brings all those answers to light. Candace went to Minneapolis, to the scene of the violent, racially divided aftermath that tore our nation apart, and she followed the money to uncover BLM executives living in million-dollar mansions. But that's just the start of how all that money is being used to further corrupt traditional American values. If you want a good dose of reality to counteract the narrative, you need to see this film. Go to dailywire.com/Dinesh, become a Daily Wire Plus member. You won't want to miss it. Once again, that's dailywire.com/Dinesh. I've never heard of this guy, Chris Heath, but he's a writer from New York who has an article in the current issue of Esquire magazine. Now, Esquire is a left-wing magazine that often publishes pure tripe. In fact, they've published a few tirades against me. And by and large, it's a magazine that's a kind of a joke. It's like Rolling Stone. It's junk, not worth reading. But sometimes these magazines come out with something that surprises you. And evidently, Chris Heath has convinced Esquire to run a massively long article. In fact, it's 95 pages as I printed it out. In fact, I printed it out on both sides to save paper. It's so long and so detailed. And it's a really good article, surprisingly good. Why? Because it's an in-depth look at the Whitmer kidnapping trial. And the writer approaches it, he's a progressive, he's a leftist, and he approaches it with, I came into this trial really having accepted the government's narrative. And he begins the article by laying out the government's narrative. And the government's narrative, he says, seems to be on the face of it pretty convincing, because you've got all these defendants and they evidently were part of a kidnapping plot to kidnap Whitmer. Sure, there was FBI participation, FBI infiltration, FBI informants and FBI agents, but nevertheless, maybe this was a plot that these men wanted to do anyway, and the FBI's presence was there to foil them from carrying it out. So the FBI wanted to find out what's going on, and so the writer, Chris Heath, says, and then you look on top of it, you see that a couple of the defendants struck plea bargains, evidently confessing their participation in the plot. You see that that there was confiscated 70 guns, a bunch of magazines, ammunition, scopes, silencers, various types of explosives. So this appears to be a smoking gun. These guys they've obviously gone ahead with this plot. And then he quotes incriminating statements that these guys, several of these defendants, have made. Here's a guy named Fox, I think it's Adam Fox. Snatch and grab, man. Grab the effing governor. Just grab the bitch. Because at that point, we do that, dude, it's over. So think of it. Here's a guy who seems to be saying, let's kidnap her. Here's another guy, Caserta. When the time comes, there will be no need to try and strike fear through presence. The fear will be manifest through bullets. Talking about using a hail of bullets. Croft again. Another guy, Croft. Wham, a quick, precise grab on that effing governor. And all you're going to end up having to possibly take out is her armed guard. So here's a guy talking about evidently assassinating the armed guard. And here's Fox again. I want to have the governor hog-tied, laid out on a table while we pose around like we just made the world's biggest GD drug bust, bro. So this is a lot of, it seems like, very incriminating conversations on the part of these so-called militia guys or these would-be kidnappers. And so the government puts forward this case. It's a plot. It's highly insidious. These people not only talked about it, but they went ahead and acquired ammunition. They were going to do it until we busted them. And so Chris Heath, the writer, is like, I was kind of on board. I was persuaded until, and this is the part that so few people go down. Chris Heath goes, until I actually began to look more closely and began to look into the lives of these defendants. And here is where the article becomes really interesting, because Chris Heath goes into this and he says, first I was looking for the connective tissue that, he goes, there was a barrage of quotes and details thrown out in the case. But he goes, what I was looking for was when these men kind of came together, these accused conspirators, and said, together, let's go kidnap the governor. And he goes, I never saw that. That connective tissue was not present. And so he goes, I kept looking for it. And he goes, and then it hit me. There's no connective tissue. The connective tissue is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. In other words, the connective tissue is coming not from the so-called conspirators themselves. It is being supplied from the outside by the U.S. government that wants to bust them. Illegal drug trafficking has turned our southern border into a war zone. It's a war that no one wants to talk about. Watch Border Battle, the new 6-part limited documentary series from Turning Point USA. It exposes the evil and inhumanity of drug cartels and the illegal drug trade. How the drug fentanyl, the cartel Jalisco New Generation, and the Sinaloa cartel have created the worst overdose death crisis in American history. Fentanyl has killed tens of thousands of Americans. It's so dangerous, just 3 grains of fentanyl can kill you. Border Battle reveals how illegal immigration, human trafficking, and America's drug crisis has only been made worse by decades of government neglect. Today's drug cartels are militarized with sophisticated weapons, tanks, and drones that drop explosives on their drug competitors right on our southern border. Hear directly from Drug and Border Patrol agents about the horrific conditions along the border and what life is really like on the front lines. Watch Border Battle now. Download the full 6-part documentary series at salemnow.com. That's Salem Now, S-A-L-E-M now.com. I'm talking about Chris Heath's article in Esquire that is about the Whitmer kidnapping. This is a very eye-opening article. It's called The Militiamen, the Governor, and the Kidnapping That Wasn't. Even the title is really good because this was a kidnapping that never actually happened. Now, at one critical point in the trial, Chris Heath says the government is putting on this evidence and they're showing that these guys, they weren't just talking about kidnapping. They conducted a nighttime reconnaissance on Governor Whitmer's Elk Rapids vacation home. So they were call it casing the joint, because they were doing a sort of rehearsal. And so this truck, with 5 people, it was a Chevy Silverado, was now approaching Whitmer's Elk Rapids vacation home. And then Chris Heath goes, but I began to then look at who's in the truck. And he says, of the 5 people, there was Fox and Croft, 2 of the defendants. They happened to be sitting in the back seat. Croft is in the middle, next to a man who, as it turns out, is an FBI informant. That's FBI informant number 1. The truck is being driven by the owner, a guy named Dan Chappell. Dan Chappell is also an FBI informant. In fact, he's the guy who suggested the trip. And sitting next to Dan Chappell is another man who is not only an FBI informant, but an FBI agent. So you got 5 guys in the truck. 3 of them are either FBI informants or FBI agents. And so Chris Heath is like, what kind of a reconnaissance is this in which the majority of participants are, in fact, FBI agents or informants? Of course, the total number of FBI agents involved in this so-called operation was more than 12. So then at another point in the trial, the government introduces this kind of seemingly horrifying discussion where these militants are talking about taking down a highway bridge near the government's vacation home. And the idea is that they sort of take down or blow up the bridge, and so it's going to be much, much more difficult for law enforcement to get to the location. Again, this is all presented as part of this kind of diabolical, well-thought-out, pre-planned operation. And then Chris Heath says, I began to look at the communications between these guys where they're talking about it. And he writes this sentence, does it make any difference to know, and he's being very gentle here, Chris Heath is the writer, does it make any difference to know that the relevant text exchange between Garbin and the FBI informant Chappell included 9 emojis, 2 Borat GIFs, multiple movie references, 1 to Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and a lol. What he's getting at is, this is a bunch of yahoos who are just talking shit. In other words, this is not the mafia conspiring to take some guy out. This is not some kind of an established criminal enterprise. This is a bunch of guys who are shooting their mouths off and coming up with big harebrained schemes and essentially talking as if because they want to have significance and import. They want to be big, important. Yeah, we're going to go get the governor and so on. But they even recognize their own powerlessness, and the emojis, the lols are kind of a way of saying, you know what? We're a bunch of yahoos. Everybody knows we're not actually going to pull anything like this off. We never have. This is not the kind of thing that yahoos do. And so what the writer Chris Heath is getting at is that when you get close to the lives of these people, it's not the kind of lives that I live. It's not the kind of lives that Chris Heath lives. It's probably not the kind of life that you live, but you're in a different world. You're in a world where, again, when you look at the government presenting the evidence, they'll present a scene where this guy took his children and his family and they were eating burgers and shooting ammunition and talking about explosives. And Chris Heath is like, there's a segment of the American population that actually, in which guns are a part of their life. They go around, they shoot things. They shoot in the air, they shoot at trees, and then they go eat burgers. And so this does not mean that these are dangerous insurgents who need to be treated as if they are a revival of the 21st century version of the Civil War. That is a caricature. It is being imposed on people by other people who don't even understand anything about them. So what I find interesting about the article, and there's a lot of poignant detail in it is it opens up a window into the lives of a lot of people who are really, in many ways, at the bottom of the ladder. People who live difficult lives, people who have a lot of anger in them, and they have extreme views. But the idea that they were in some genuine way about to kidnap the governor of Michigan, this is complete nonsense. And yet many of these people will pay, in effect, with their lives, for their participation in this so-called plot. With the consumer price index rising yet again, the stock market has been in absolute turmoil. Well, what's our illustrious leader doing to quell the surge of inflation that's destroying so many American families? Oh yeah, spending more money and adding to the burden. Well, don't bury your head in the sand while your savings get decimated. Do something about it. I'm diversified into gold with Birch Gold. You can be too. Text Dinesh to 989898. Birch Gold will send you a free information kit on protecting your savings with gold in a tax-sheltered account. These are great people, almost 20 years experience converting IRAs and 401ks into precious metals IRAs. Don't let the left devalue your savings. Text Dinesh to 989898. Claim your free information kit from Birch Gold. Again, you can own physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account, and Birch Gold will help you to do it. Join their thousands of satisfied customers like me. Check them out. Text Dinesh to 989898 and secure your future with gold today. Something very interesting is going on in Dearborn, Michigan. Now, it turns out that the federal government has been, which is to say the Biden administration, has been pushing all this explicit gay activist literature on the schools. This is horrific because it's not just going on in Dearborn. They're doing it across the country. They're having young children read books like This Book is Gay. Here's another book. It's called Flamer. Another book, The Lovely Bones, and Push. Apparently, these books go into explicit details of sex acts. They have pornography. They talk about rape. They talk about incest. So it turns out the Muslims are very angry about this. And in Dearborn, Michigan, which, by the way, has a substantial proportion of Muslim Americans, the Muslims have taken the lead. Now, they're joined by some Christian parents, so you've got a very interesting alliance of a conservative alliance of Christians and Muslims showing up at the school board meeting and, by the way, shutting it down, causing a big ruckus. There was apparently a Muslim kind of a leader, and his name is Imam Syed Hassan al-Qazwini of the Islamic Institute of America. And this guy preaches a sermon, and he tells the Muslims in the audience, you go to this meeting. What's going on is bad. Now, you might think this guy is some kind of a right-winger. Not at all. In fact, this was a guy who came out against Trump. In fact, he said that Trump had marginalized Muslims. Trump was a, quote, white supremacist. So this is not a Trump supporter. But nevertheless, he is a conservative, by which I mean socially and culturally conservative. And so he helps to sort of stir up this mobilization of Muslim parents who show up at the board meeting and they start a cry of vote them out, the school board. Basically what they're saying is, you know what? You keep talking about democracy. You keep talking about people voting and exercising their power. They go, we Muslims are the majority in this area, and we don't want you teaching this kind of nonsense to our kids. Get out of here. Stop doing it. And if you won't stop doing it, resign. Now, interestingly, the left-wing whites who are on this school board were like, well, perhaps we can find some kind of compromise. I mean, the left does not want to get into a fight with Muslims. And by the way, from our point of view, this is fantastic because we have basically two groups. One is you may call them the radical Muslims. Some of them are radical, some of them probably not so much. And the gay activists are kind of at each other here. And quite honestly, this is a show that you and I can kind of enjoy because the cause for which these Muslim parents are mobilized is actually correct. What they're saying is that we don't want pornography and sexually explicit material to be landing on our kids. Now, here's a guy from the school board, and this is how out of it these people are. This is a guy named Berry, Berry. He goes, perhaps we can have an opt-out provision in which these Muslims don't have to have their kids exposed. So we'll continue to teach this stuff. He goes, back when I was in school, it was co-ed swimming. If some parents don't want their sons or daughters swimming together, they could opt out. He goes, so opt-out is a way to give parents control without breaking the laws. So apparently this dummy thinks that it is required by law. It's not required by law. The Biden administration is trying to use federal funding as a leverage, as a kind of way of pushing this kind of, you may call it, this is really disgusting in the sense of not age-appropriate material on these children. And so this guy's acting like it's out of his hands because it's a public school, because it gets government funding. They have to do this. The best they can do is allow these Muslim parents to opt out. I think what the Muslim parents have wisened up, and what they're saying is, we don't have to opt out. We're the majority. We can actually elect our own people to the school board. We can make sure that this kind of stuff is kept out of the public schools so our children are not exposed to it. So I like this. Wadia Yazir Al-Azaba, he holds up a sign. If democracy matters, we're the majority. So the point they're trying to make is, and he goes on to explain, they are proponents of democracy, but only if it supports liberal values. He means leftist values. The moment it goes against liberal values, they are authoritarian and they want to impose their own values on people. I think what we see here is that there is a limited opportunity for conservatives to ally with conservative Muslims to fight, if you will, the agenda of the left in the schools. This is a novel approach. It's the kind of creativity that we need on our side to defeat the left across the board. What some of us would do just to be young again, the simple things like climbing stairs, getting in and out of bed, taking a walk aren't always that simple. Too many aches and pains, but they can be, because thankfully now there's a 100% drug-free solution to those aches and pains. It's called Relief Factor. Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation. That's the source of aches and pains. The vast majority of people who try Relief Factor love it. They order more because it works for them. Debbie's a true believer. She can finally do the exercises she loves, planks, push-ups, or stationary bike, all thanks to Relief Factor. It's been a real game changer for her and for many other people. You too can benefit. Try it for yourself. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of just $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 833-690-7246 to find out more about this offer. That number again, 833-690-7246, or go to relieffactor.com. Feel the difference. Guys, I'm really happy to welcome to the podcast a friend of mine and actually, well, a hero of mine. This is Larry Elder. He's been called the sage from South Central, and that probably gives you an idea of someone who's 100 years old. Larry is very young. He's a best-selling author, documentary filmmaker, newspaper columnist. He was host of the nationally syndicated show, The Larry Elder Show. He ran for governor of California in the recent recall election. Larry's also the executive producer of Uncle Tom 2, a movie that if you haven't seen, you should. Uncle Tom 2 is the movie. Larry, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you. You have been talking about the theme of fatherlessness as a core problem in the Black community now for some time. I thought of you in the recent kind of skirmish between Herschel Walker and his son Christian Walker. Christian Walker launches this kind of tirade against his dad, but behind it was, I think, and Christian at one point even says, he goes, it's not easy to grow up fatherless. So I wonder if you could comment, if you will, on what's happening with Herschel Walker, how you think about that particular controversy, but then we'll talk about the broader problem, which has been really your forte.
Well, Dinesh, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. You were kind enough not to also mention that I'm called the black face of white supremacy. And finally, I've never called my producer honey, so I'm assuming your producer is Debbie, your wife.
Yes, exactly.
Because otherwise, I'm going to send a text to Debbie.
Oh, yes. Well, our other cameraman is Rohan, so I certainly don't refer to him that way.
Now, as for Herschel Walker, I know about the friction he has with his son. As you know, for 10 years, I didn't speak to my own father, even though my father was in the House was a good man. I just completely misunderstood his anger because he was tired. He worked 2 full-time jobs. He cooked for a family on the weekend to make additional money because he wanted to have a stay-at-home mom, even though he had a dual janitor's salary. And my dad also went to night school a couple nights a week to get his GED because he was literally thrown out of the house when he was 13 years old. My point is, it's not easy being a father, as you well know, and kids often go through a period where they're upset with their family, with their father. So you really don't know the backstory. Bottom line is, Herschel Walker, as I have been, talks about the importance of the family, the importance of fathers. 70% of Black kids enter the world today without a father married to the mother. That number was only, in quote, 25% in 1965. Now 25% of white kids enter the world without a father married to the mother. Half Hispanic kids and 40% of all American kids do. It is, in my opinion, the number one social problem we're facing in America. We got a lot of problems, crime, drugs, all sorts of things. But the number one problem facing America socially is the growing number of kids who enter the world without a father married to the mother. And that is something that we tackle a lot in Uncle Tom 2. We talked, Dinesh, in Uncle Tom 1 about how, despite horrific obstacles, Black people kept moving forward after slavery. Why? A belief in family. It was rare for a kid to be born without a father in the house. Belief in Judeo-Christian values. A belief in patriotism, even as America was not living up to its ideals. And a belief in entrepreneurship, to the point where in 1940, 87% of Blacks lived below the poverty line. 20 years later, 1960, before the Civil Rights Acts, before much of the civil rights legislation, that number had fallen to 47%. That's a 40-point drop in 20 years, arguably the greatest 20-year period of economic growth for Blacks in the history of this country. Now, fast forward, we have Black Lives Matter that 85% of Black people support. On their website, they trashed the nuclear family. They embraced Karl Marx, who did not believe in God, hated religion, and also hated private property and hated entrepreneurship. So the foundations that made Black people still endure after slavery, despite horrific obstacles, are now under attack by the left, by socialists, by collectivists, by those who want to redistribute income, and by organizations like Black Lives Matter. And we tackle that in Uncle Tom 2, which, by the way, is available on uncletom.com.
I mean, Larry, what you're saying, it goes so much against the idea. The prevailing narrative, of course, is that Blacks were downtrodden, they had slavery, then it transmuted into segregation, and it wasn't until the civil rights movement came along that we began to see progress for the first time, Blacks entering the middle class. You're telling a different history. What you're really saying is that, first of all, Blacks made a heroic effort after the Civil War to reunite their families, and for much of the 20th century, the Black family was relatively intact. And then you're saying that there was really a massive spurt of economic progress prior to the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement, if anything, only continued, perhaps even slowed down the pace of that progress. I think this history is absolutely critical because it sets the stage for what we believe about today. So would you say that Uncle Tom 2 kind of navigates between the past and the present, relating the one to the other, and then pointing to the future?
Absolutely. And everything you said was beautifully stated, and I agree with it 100%. In last year, Dinesh, I'm watching the Super Bowl, and there's a Citigroup commercial. And there's a Black guy who's talking about Black Wall Street and how in 1921, the Tulsa Massacre destroyed Black Wall Street. What he didn't tell you are two things. That area was completely rebuilt in about 3 to 5 years without one dime of government money. And secondly, it was not referred to as Black Wall Street until after it was rebuilt. And the point is, there were all sorts of so-called Black Wall Streets all over America. It is a lie that that Blacks were downtrodden until the Civil Rights Movement came along. And then all of a sudden, we realized that we could realize our potential to some degree. And then the white man put his knee again on our necks, figuratively, as in the case of George Floyd. It's a big, fat lie. And Uncle Tom 2 exposes a big fat lie. You see all sorts of archival footage never shown before of Black people, entrepreneurs, what happened in Harlem in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. People from the South came to the North and bought property to the point where white people were complaining about Black gentrification in Harlem. So the civil rights, the war on poverty that Lyndon Johnson launched in the mid-60s was, in my opinion, one of the greatest mistakes ever made in America. What we've done from 65 until now is incentivize women to marry the government and incentivize men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And if you look at the spending since the civil rights, since the war on poverty in the mid 60s, it's over $22 trillion. And you look at a graph and you see parallel lines of the growth of kids being born outside of wedlock with the amount of money being spent to essentially reward women for marrying the government and for abandoning the men in their lives.
Let's take a short pause. When we come back, more with Larry Elder. The AARP is rallying behind the new tax and spend bill, promising members it will reduce inflation, bring relief from big pharma. No, in reality, it will devastate the 65-plus crowd financially and medically. Now, AMAC knows the truth. AMAC is the Association of Mature American Citizens. It advocates for its members. You'll never find them in anyone's back pocket. I trust AMAC. They're honest. They fight for your conservative values. Join AMAC today like Debbie and I have. AMAC offers special discounts and benefits, plus they provide access to financial and insurance counseling services. For just $16 a year, you can join AMAC. Go to amac.us/Dinesh to start enjoying benefits. Anyone can join, but if you're a senior, what are you waiting for? Don't let the AARP misrepresent and mislead you. Join AMAC today. AMAC serves its members with integrity and compassion. Join or renew today at amac.us/Dinesh. That's amac.us/Dinesh. I'm back with the sage from South Central, Larry Elder. We're talking about his new film, Uncle Tom 2. By the way, you can see that film on uncletom.com, uncletom.com. Larry, you mentioned a moment ago, we were talking about Lyndon Johnson. You mentioned the war on poverty. Now, as you well know, Lyndon Johnson has a racist history. The Democratic Party, of course, has a long racist history. So the idea that this guy is the great champion of black advancement, I mean, on the face of it, it's a little preposterous. Now, you also use the term mistake, which would seem to imply Lyndon Johnson might have been a well-meaning guy. Maybe he made a kind of a logical error. Is there more to it than that? Do you believe that this was just rank incompetence on the part of the Democrats, or do you think something perhaps more insidious was going on?
Well, in the case of LBJ, I do believe it was just rank incompetence. You can find all sorts of speeches and private conversations where he truly thought that this war on poverty was going to make people more self-sufficient. Obviously, the opposite happened. But there are more sinister people like the KGB defector that we talked to that we feature in the film. He said there was a concerted effort by the communists to infiltrate the civil rights movement because they thought the nerve center of America was race relations. And you can pit blacks against whites, whites against blacks against blacks who are conservatives. That could destroy America from within because we're way too strong to be destroyed from without. We also have people like a guy named Manning Johnson, black man, who was a communist. And in the 20s, 30s, 40s, he talks about how they had meetings where they talked about using race to make America implode from the inside. He later on renounced his communism and began to expose the communists for what they're doing. These are people, Dinesh, who hate America, people like a guy named Eric Mann, who trained Patrisse Cullors, the co-founder of Black Lives Matter. She proudly brags she's a self-trained Marxist, while Eric Mann, a white man, trained her. The founders of the NAACP were all white, they were all socialists, and they used W.E.B. Du Bois as the black face of the organization. But their goal was, again, to attack capitalism and to undermine America, to create a socialist utopia by using the black civil rights movement. So the whole point behind Uncle Tom 2 is the black civil rights movement was hijacked, kidnapped, use your favorite verb, and transformed from a movement for equal rights to a movement for equal results, equal outcomes, which are two very different things.
I mean, what I find fascinating, Larry, about all this is that you're saying that there was a recognition among the Marxists and the communists that the class struggle that Marx thought would be the sort of lever to create a social division, to create revolution, that would not be sufficient and that they needed to tap into the deep vein of racial resentment. And so what we see today, this kind of, let's call it identity socialism, identity politics married with socialism, all of this goes back and is in a way all exposed in this film.
Absolutely. And if you read the book Up From Slavery, written by Booker T. Washington, that came out, Dinesh, in 1901. That's just 36 years after slavery. You read that and you read some of the works by people on the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's night and day. Booker T. Washington was optimistic. He was hopeful. He believed in hard work and accountability. He wasn't at all interested in social integration. He felt that if you learn a skill, a trade, something of value, people will come to you irrespective of your race. You fast forward and you hear all this bull about, I caught myself, all this stuff about systemic racism, foundational racism. I think Beto O'Rourke even used the term endemic racism. This is what the left has done. They want to keep Black people angry because Black people in the recent decades have voted 95% for the Democratic Party because Black people believe the goal is social justice. And the Democratic Party has successfully marketed itself as a party of social justice and branded Republicans as a party against social justice. So as long as Black people are angry and believe that racism remains a major problem in America, and it clearly does not, the hope is that they'll march in there like lemmings and pull that lever for the Democratic Party. Can I say one other thing quickly about Uncle Tom, too?
Sure.
To prepare for this interview, Dinesh, I went on IMDb, as I did yesterday, and I'm going to tell you what a wonderful rating Uncle Tom 2 had. Yesterday, it had a 9.2. This morning, it has a 7.1. A whole bunch of people, maybe 40 people, in one night gave it a 1 rating. And if you look at the ratings, 86.5 rather, of all the ratings give it an 8 or higher, and then all of a sudden a boatload of people have given it a 1. However, if you look at the 67 written reviews where you have to identify yourself, 66 of it give it a 10, 1 gives it a 9. Not a single person who gave it a 1 dared to do a review and put his or her name to that review. So something is afoot, my friend.
Well, this is how the left operates, right? I mean, we are familiar with this, the way they deploy these. It's probably a bunch of interns hired by Media Matters or some left-wing organization. Hey, right. Let's go spike this film. I mean, this happens to my movies as well. Let's close out, Larry, by talking about Stacey Abrams, because she's in what appears to be a very tough race against Brian Kemp. And I'm seeing news reports, probably written mostly by white guys, basically saying that Stacey Abrams is being screwed over by black males. In other words, not that she doesn't have a majority of black males voting for her, but they're not as many as the black females. So does this suggest to you that it may be that among black males, there's an awareness now that maybe the Democratic Party isn't delivering the goods? Does the GOP, the Republican Party, have an opportunity here?
Oh, yes. In 2016, Donald Trump got 8% of the black vote. In 2020, he got 12%. That's a 50% increase in 4 years. He got 20% of the black male vote. So something is happening. A lot of black people, including black men, are reconsidering their allegiance to the Democratic Party. But I don't want to give Stacey Abrams a pass for this. On election night in 2018, she refused to concede, refused to acknowledge her defeat, and for the next 2 years, referred to her defeat as one of voter suppression. All of a sudden, she claims that she acknowledged her defeat on election night. No, she did not. And on my Twitter account, at Larry Elder, I've got the 5-minute cross-examination that Ted Cruz did with Stacey Abrams, in which he used her own words that she's been using for the last 3 years, claiming that she lost because of voter suppression. And the reason they're saying this, Dinesh, is because they see the hypocrisy. We question the results of 2020. We're called election deniers. We're accused of threatening the foundations of our republic. But Hillary referred to Donald Trump as illegitimate for 4 years, called the election stolen for 4 years. Her social media platforms were never shut down. To this day, Al Gore believes the Supreme Court put George W. Bush into the White House. Nobody calls these people election deniers. Jimmy Carter publicly said in 2019 that he believes the Russians put Donald Trump there. And there were 2 major findings by the Intelligence Committee examining 2016. Finding number 1 is the Russians failed to change a single vote tally, even though they tried. Yet 66% of Democrats, supermajority in a YouGov poll 2018, believe the Russians changed vote tallies to elect Donald Trump. The other major finding was that we don't know whether or not the Russian interference altered the outcome of the election. But according to Gallup, 78% of Democrats believe the Russian interference altered the outcome of the election. My long way of saying this, a greater percentage of Democrats believe 2016 was stolen than we believe that of 2020. But nobody calls them election deniers. This is the hypocrisy, the double standard, and the selective outrage that, of course, we deal with every single day.
And no one better than you, Larry, in pointing out and exposing these double standards. Guys, the movie to see is called Uncle Tom 2. You can see it at uncletom.com. Larry, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure as always.
You've heard me say it, I'm not a super fan of the flavor of veggies, but I have to admit, when I'm in the produce section, all those vibrant colors of fruits and veggies look so good. And Dr. Howard at Balance of Nature explains that all those colors you see in the produce section equal nutritional variety. Different colors signify different key nutrients. So if you eat only your favorite one or two veggies, you're missing a whole world of vital nutrients. This is why Debbie and I take these 6 little fruits and veggie capsules each day. Each daily dose is made up of a blend of 31 different fruits and veggies. 31. So variety equals vitality. Give your body everything it needs with Balance of Nature. For a limited time, all new preferred customers get an additional 35% discount and free shipping on your first Balance of Nature order. Use discount code AMERICA. Call 800-246-8751. That's 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com and use discount code AMERICA. The last time I talked about how Odysseus has been instructed by Circe to go through the isle that is haunted by the sirens. These are these strange creatures, female, who sing these melodious songs. And Circe told Odysseus, plug the ears of your men with wax so they don't hear the sirens, because if they do, and if you do, you will be so seduced by this kind of melancholy music that you won't be able to leave. You'll stay there. You'll die there. You'll rot. Your bones, where your flesh will fall off your bones. And in fact, around the sirens, you can see all these rotting men who listened to the music and couldn't leave. Now, this is a very strange episode. And Odysseus, by the way, does what Circe says. He plugs the ears of his men with wax. Now, he himself, being Odysseus, does want to hear the song of the sirens. So he has the men tie him to the mast so that the ship is not going to stop. He's not going to be able to get off. They're going to kind of go past the sirens. In a sense, he's being transported against his temptation, if you will. But what's this really all about? Is it about melancholy music? Is it to be taken entirely at face value? I think as we read from Homer, we realize that something else is actually going on. So let's read the sirens. This is the sirens. Odysseus, come here. You are well known for many stories. Glory of the Greeks. Now stop your ship and listen to our voices. All of those who pass this way hear honeyed song poured from our mouths. The music brings them joy, and they go on their way with greater knowledge. See, now this is a lie right here. The sirens are saying, hey, listen, just listen to us. We have great music. You're going to listen to us, and then you can go on. Now, we know for a fact, and in fact, Circe had warned Odysseus, you're not going to be able to go on. So the sirens here are engaging in a kind of false promise to Odysseus that he'll be able to listen to the music, enjoy it, and then go home. The music brings them joy, and they go on their way with greater knowledge. And now the line I want to focus on. Since we know everything the Greeks and Trojans suffered in Troy by God's will, and we know whatever happens anywhere on earth. Now, the sirens here are saying that we are not only singers, but we have supernatural, or let's just call it transcendent knowledge. We know things about things that human beings are familiar with, but the human beings themselves can never know the full depths. So here's Odysseus. He's been in the Trojan War, but of course he's been in the Trojan War always at one particular place in any particular time. So he has, you can call it the human perspective, a kind of perspectival glance at the war. He doesn't know what's happening on the rest of the battlefield. He doesn't know what's happening behind the battlements of Troy. He doesn't know, you may call it, the hidden causes of the war. He's just a participant. He sees things from a highly limited and partial view. But the sirens are saying, we know the whole story. And we know the whole story, not just about the Trojan War, but we kind of know the whole story about everything. So the Sirens here are claiming a certain kind of omniscience, or at least a vastly deeper, wider, and greater knowledge than any human can possibly possess. And what they're saying is, we're offering that to you, Odysseus. So you can see here this very powerful human temptation, and we see it in our own day. I mean, you see it, for example, with scientists who want to know everything and in a sense, test everything and push the limits. Debbie was showing me yesterday that, where was this, honey? Was that in Michigan, or it was at some university? No, I think it was in Boston, at Boston University or Boston Medical Center, that they're taking viruses, and in fact, a strain of the COVID virus, and they've created 80% lethality. Think about that, a COVID virus strain that would kill 80% of the people it infected. Think of what that would do to America if that virus got out, or to the world. And apparently human beings and people in our own country are under the so-called gain of function justification. We have to test these viruses. We have to make them more lethal, really so we can figure out how to deal with them. But of course, when you make a virus more lethal, you've got a more lethal virus on your hands. It is this kind of inexhaustible quest. If we can do it, why not do it? If we can cross a human being with a pig, why don't we create a kind of hybrid being that is half pig and half human? Why don't we test the bounds of knowledge? So this quest for knowledge, which is in a way intrinsically human, but here Homer is right on it. And right here, the Sirens are promising Odysseus this kind of knowledge. And what Circe seems to be saying to Odysseus is that this kind of knowledge is not meant for human beings. In a way, it's destructive of human beings. It will cause human beings to be frozen, to be immobilized, to have their flesh fall off their bones. And so, yes, you can get a glimpse of what the Sirens have to say, but you need to tie yourself to the mast so you can move on with life, not with the full knowledge of the Sirens, but life as it continues in the limited, which is to say, human way.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and salemnow.com.